Good morning.
Good morning.
During Black History Month, we want to take the opportunity in our worship to focus on achievement and feature some of our leaders in our community who are helping us to achieve. Today it is my privilege to welcome to First Presbyterian Church Mr. Cedric Dew. He is the Executive Director of the Jamaica YMCA and has been since 2004. When you read Mr. Dew's bio, he has a long history of commitment and service to people, making sure people do well. He has worked in Brooklyn, he's worked at Elmcore, he's worked in Manhattan with Boys and Girls Club. In this neighborhood, I regard you, Cedric, as one of the souls of the neighborhood.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
And so on behalf of First Presbyterian Church, let me say welcome. And if you could tell us a little about your origins, your story, what helped Cedric to get to this point in his journey?
First of all, thank you for allowing me to be here today. I mean, this just means so much to me because Pastor O'Connor, I really have great respect for you, and you are truly an angel in this community and what you do. So first, let me pay homage to you. Just to sort of give you a little background on myself, I'm sort of a migrant of the South. My ancestors were slaves in America, American Cherokee and African. I ended up in New York basically from migrating from the South, Birmingham, Alabama to, we got some Birmingham, Alabamans out there, okay. From Birmingham, Alabama to New York. I was a transient child, very troubled childhood. I grew up in probably everything that you could grow up in that was considered dysfunctional. Child abuse, domestic violence, alcoholism, poverty. I mean, you name it, I really grew up in those environments. And but the foundation ultimately was the fact that my mother was smart enough to say, you know what, when mama can't do it, let the grandmama do it. And so I spent 7 years literally in Alabama and 7 years in New York and not more than 2 years in either place, transient back and forth between New York and Alabama up until I was about the age of about 13, 14. Mm-hmm. So that's sort of how I migrated to New York permanently.
What did you learn from both women which continues to carry you on your journey?
I mean, I think what I've learned from both women is their perseverance. You know, my grandmother raised 13 children. And to be the grandchild of a woman who was gracious in the South during the periods of racism and civil unrest. You know, one of the stories my grandmother always told me was she would tell me the story about this woman who was at her place of work, and what would happen is every Friday my grandmother had to go search for her paycheck. She would never meet her and give her paycheck. She would work all week, 12, 14, 16 hours, mm-hmm. But every day, every Friday, graciously, my grandmother went and found this woman and with a smile said, "Can I be paid now?" Mm. And she would never let this woman see the discomfort of her actions. Mm-hmm. She used graciousness and kindness as a means for overcoming adversity. Mm. And I mean, so for me, that was one of the most compelling stories. And I think from the other side, watching my mother struggle with an alcoholic, a World War II veteran who had mental illnesses, and you know, we know that a lot of our brothers come back who've struggled in war. Watching my mother have the strength to one day get up and say, you know what, this can't work anymore. Mm-hmm. It's got to change. And then seeing also too me, you know, I remember 1968, I was 9 years old, and I decided I was going to start fighting back. I was going to fight a grown man back. Mm. And my mother said, "This ain't going to be good for you." And so what she did was she said, I'm gonna send you back down to your grandparents, and I'm gonna get out of this for us. And so when I came back in 1972, 73, she had left him. And that was probably the most significant moment in coming back and seeing her beginning to heal. So that's what I learned from it.
Well, thanks for sharing.
Absolutely.
Can you tell us about your work at the Jamaica Y and what shapes your work and the passion you have for young people in this community?
You know, it's interesting because the first thing that shapes my work is that I always start out by saying, I am you and you are me. I am every one of the children that I have the pleasure of working with. I'm every one of their struggles. I'm every one of their discomforts. I'm every one of their insecurities. And what I try to do is I always replace myself back in their moment and try to bring it forward. Because although times are different, the experiences are very similar. And without an empathy for their time, we lose sight of and we start to glamorize ourselves in our own time versus their time and their experience. Their time is moving so much faster. They have so much more information. And what we have to do to help our children is to filter that information, to be the foundation of all of the things that, where for us, you know, it was probably just the drunk guy down the block that was the most negative influence. With them, they've got the internet, they've got television, they've got peer pressure at levels that we didn't have, and trying to help them filter through that is part of what I try to do with everything that I do in designing programs and everything I do in trying to surround them with positive role models and everything we do in just our general philosophy at the YMCA.
We appreciate the Y, and the Y has a number of programs. There's an after-school academy, a leaders club, a global teens club, and now a big center called the Y Roads Center, which seeks to integrate young people and prepare them for the work of work. Can you tell us about some principles which has guided you on your journey?
You know, it's funny. There are two sets of principles that guide me, and I've spent a lot of time talking to young people about these principles. And one is 7 forms of power. Oftentimes, our young people, we live in a sports era, so young people are so willing to engage in sports. I mean, every third child is out here either playing soccer, playing basketball, or playing another sport because they believe that exercise and sports will take them someplace. And what I try to do is I try to tell young people, okay, that's great. Have a sport, but also have a life sport. Have some fundamental principles that you do every day, just like, you know, I always use the analogy of push-ups. When you first start trying to exercise, you do 1 push-up, then you do 5 push-ups, then you do 10 push-ups, and eventually you can potentially do 100 push-ups. What I say is you need to apply the same principles to life. And one of the principles that you apply is the 7 forms of power. So, for example, the power of reference. Each young person or anyone who's trying to be successful should each week network and develop a reference pool of people that help them on their journey to take them where they need to go. And so in our Y Road Center, that's what we do. We take people out into the community and we have them network in the community. One of the other most important forms of, the 7 forms of power is the power of charisma. Everyone has to stop for a minute and take a look in the mirror and find out what is that thing that you resonate when you walk through the door. All of our great leaders had it. You know, Dr. King had the incredible gift for his tonality and his speech. You know, celebrities have it, whether it's beauty or whether it's just the way you smile. Resonate that in your day-to-day. Understand what that is so that you can carry that with you throughout your life, because it will take you through doors. It will introduce you to people. It will create opportunities. One of the other ones I always talk about with young people is the power of inference, reputation. What will people say about you? In the end, what will people say about you as an individual? I like to start out with just saying, be about your word. Whatever you say you're going to do, do it. the easiest form. And I always tell you, none of this stuff takes money. It just takes you and the gifts that God gave you within yourself. And so by translating those fundamentals, the other thing I always talk to them about is, and it goes back to this narrow road of travel. Travel a broad road. Choose an expertise through education. Choose something that you would do if no one ever paid you, and choose a craft, something that just interests you. Because when you build 3 components of yourself through your hobbies, your crafts, and your expertise, they braid themselves together as sort of this vine that travels, and it travels stronger. A vine is stronger than any one stem. I give the example with myself. I watched my mother work in sweatshops in the 70s. They didn't call them sweatshops back then, they were just factories. Yeah. And I remember sitting with my friends in a staircase, and I said to them, wow, if my mom's got to work this hard to pay the little bit of bills, the bills we've got, I'm gonna need 3 jobs by the time I grow up. Mm-hmm. And it's funny, I just said it out loud, and ironically, it became sort of my mantra. And so I grew up loving the game of basketball. I became a basketball official. I've been a basketball official for now 38 years. I also loved talking, and so talking took me into videography, which took me into sports broadcasting, which took me to where I am today, because learning to talk and learning to articulate allowed me to become a better leader. And also, too, I always cared about people. And so my expertise was tied always to social service and working with folks. I learned it through sports, but it translated into its own thing. And I tell young people, don't travel a narrow path, travel a broad path, because you never know where it's going to take you. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You know? So, I also take your hobbies and experience hobbies. One of the things that always bothers me when people say, I used to write, or I used to draw, or I used to sing. How can you let a voice inside of you go? Take every voice that you have inside of you and travel with those voices, because when times are tough, those will be the things that will carry you through the difficult times.
Any other principles, insights you would want to share with this group of fellow travelers?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I think there's one other thing, and I always say I'm a work in progress, and I recently read a book. It's called The Happiness Advantage. And if you haven't read it, it's a great read. It's by a guy by the name of Sean Anchor, and he has these ingredients for happiness. And he didn't do it from a sociological standpoint. He did it from a scientific standpoint. And he said, you have to first be conscious in attaining happiness, because happiness is the greatest ingredient towards productive and successful life. Mm-hmm. And so he outlined these ingredients. I never thought about it this way before, but I posted this up on the side of my bed. So I wake up every morning and I look at it, and it's just sitting in my office, and I'll share it with you. He describes the ingredients for happiness as joy, gratitude, serenity, interest, hope, pride, amusement, inspiration, awe, as in, when kids say something's awesome, mm-hmm. love, and every time you think of one of those and you engage in a gesture associated with one of those activities, for me. Because every time you do it, it feeds you. Just last week, and I exercise it, so I'm on the line over at the Harvest Room, and a young lady is fidgeting for her money for her lunch, and I said, you know what, this one's on me. Mm-hmm. I mean, scientifically, it's proven that there's endorphins that go to your brain that feed you happiness when you take the time to do those kinds of things in life. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so exercising ingredients for happiness would probably be the other message I want to deliver, because I think that in the end, if we find that contribution that we make to the world, we find happiness. When we find the thing that we're meant here for, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the fifth one being self-actualization, why we are here, what is our purpose? You know, and I close by just saying, you know, Dr. Karinga, I met Dr. Karinga who wrote the Kwanzaa Principles. And I asked him, you know, I just happened to be, I had his book and I wanted him to sign it. I said, why'd you write these principles? What made you stop and do this? And he said, because he or she who contributes nothing to society has a difficult time explaining one's own existence. I thought that was the most profound
Could you say that again to us?
He or she who contributes nothing to society has a difficult time explaining one's own existence.
Cedric is one of these really powerful and deep individuals, and he has a lot to share. And in this change in Jamaica, we need guidance. And so is there anything that we could pray for you as you go forward?
Wow. And I'm a humble man, so I always say just, you know, continued health, pray for my family, and pray that one day we will build a bigger and stronger institution in the form of the YMCA.
Amen. Let's give Mr. Dew a big round of applause. Thank you.